I was in the middle of signing the final paperwork on a seven-figure acquisition when my brother walked into my office like he owned the place. Not knocked. Not called ahead. Just walked in, suit jacket wrinkled, that same smirk he's worn since we were kids, and dropped a manila folder on top of the contract I was about to finalize. My client looked up. My paralegal froze. I looked at my brother, then down at the folder, then back at him. "I need 5 minutes," he said. I smiled. I don't know where that smile came from, but it was there before I even decided to put it there. "Go ahead," I said. "We're almost done here anyway." He didn't expect that. He expected me to panic, or at least look rattled. He always expected that. I didn't give it to him. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the context, and the context is the part that still makes my chest tight when I think about it too long. I'm 31 years old. I run a mid-sized consulting firm that specializes in corporate restructuring. We have 11 full-time employees, 2 associate consultants, and a client list that includes 3 companies in the Fortune 500. I built it from nothing. From a laptop on a folding table in a studio apartment where the radiator only worked when it felt like it. My family did not help me build it. My family, in fact, told me not to try. My brother, I'll call him my brother because that's what he is, technically, is 4 years older than me. He went to the same university I did, dropped out after 2 semesters, came home, and my parents treated it like a gap year. They redecorated his bedroom, they gave him my grandfather's car. They told everyone at Thanksgiving he was figuring out his path, which was a phrase that apparently only applied to him because when I said the same thing at 22, my mother told me I was being irresponsible and that I needed to think about the family. The family, as if the family was a shared project I'd somehow agreed to fund. My father has never held a steady job in my adult memory. He consults, he says. He has a business card that says strategic advisor and a LinkedIn profile with no connections that he updates every few months. My mother worked part-time at a real estate office until I was in high school, then stopped when my brother started college because she said she needed to focus on him. They focused on him a lot. I was the one who cooked dinner 3 nights a week by the time I was 14. I was the one who figured out the fast myself, because my parents lost the paperwork and couldn't find it. I was the one who graduated summa cum laude and sat in that auditorium looking into the stands and watched my mother check her phone twice during the ceremony. I don't say any of this for sympathy. I say it because you need to understand what I was walking away from when I finally did. It happened the summer I turned 26. I had just signed my first real client, a mid-sized logistics company going through a leadership transition, and I called my mother to tell her. I remember I was sitting in my car outside the client's office building, still a little stunned that it had actually happened, and I called her before I called anyone else. She asked me if the contract had health insurance. I told her it was a client contract, not a job offer. She said, "Oh, so you're still doing the freelance thing?" I heard my brother in the background say something I couldn't make out, and she laughed at whatever it was. I said congratulations to myself quietly in the car after I hung up, and then I drove home and started working on the deliverable. Over the next 3 years, I grew the business. Slowly, then faster. I hired my first employee at year 2. Moved out of the studio and into an actual office at year 3. My parents knew I had a business. I told them, sent them the occasional update, but they treated it like a hobby I hadn't grown out of yet. My brother told a cousin at a family gathering that I was playing CEO. I heard it from the cousin a week later. I stopped going to the family gatherings. It wasn't a dramatic announcement. I didn't send a letter or make a speech. I just stopped showing up. Stopped returning calls that were clearly designed to guilt me into something. Stopped letting my mother's voice in my head when I was trying to make decisions. And the business grew. By the time I was 30, I had the office downtown, the client list, the team. I had a reputation in my industry that I had earned one difficult project at a time. I had a mentor, a woman named Cassandra who had built and sold 2 firms before I met her, who told me once that the loneliest part of building something real is that the people who should be proud of you often aren't. She was right. I had made my peace with it. Then my brother walked into my office with a manila folder. The client left. I walked him out myself, apologized quietly for the interruption, confirmed our next meeting. My paralegal, whose name is Joel and who has worked with me for 3 years and knows my family's situation exactly as well as he needs to, gave me a look on his way out that I appreciated. Then I went back into my office, closed the door, and sat down. My brother was already in the chair across from my desk. He'd moved it slightly the way he always does in rooms, repositioning furniture like a dog circling before it lies down, establishing territory. I folded my hands on the desk and waited. "Mom and Dad need help," he said. "Okay," I said. "The house has a second mortgage. Dad's thing didn't work out. Dad's thing, I didn't ask which one. We need you to help cover the payments until things stabilize." "How much?" he told me. I kept my face neutral. It was not a small number. "And," he said, and I knew there was an and. There is always an and with him. "I've been thinking about getting involved in what you're doing here." I looked at him. "I have ideas," he said, "about the business development side, client relationships. I know people." "You want a job?" I said. "A partnership," he said. "I think that's the right structure, given the family investment over the years." I let that sit in the air for a moment. The family investment. The family that had, to my knowledge, contributed exactly nothing to the business I was sitting in. "What would the equity split look like?" I said. I wasn't agreeing to anything. I just wanted to hear him say the number. He said 50%. And then he smiled. The same smile from when we were kids. The one that said he already knew how this ended. "Think about it," he said. "Mom would love to know we're working together." He left the folder on my desk. Inside was a document. Not a real legal document, I could tell from 10 feet away, but something he'd had someone put together to look like one. A partnership proposal. I didn't read it that day. I called Cassandra instead. She listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which is one of the reasons I trust her. "How long has it been since you had real contact with them?" she asked. 4 years, mostly. A few calls here and there. And suddenly the timing is now. Apparently. "Have they seen any press coverage of the firm lately?" I thought about it. We'd been mentioned in a trade publication 2 months before. A profile piece. Someone had taken a photo of the office that was better than I expected. "Probably," I said. "Right," she said. "So they've done the math. I already knew that. What I needed from Cassandra wasn't analysis. It was the thing she always gave me without me having to ask for it, which was permission to trust my own read of the situation." "There's also something else," I said. "Something I haven't told my brother yet." She waited. "The building I'm in," I said. "The owner, Mr. Hennessey. I've been in negotiations with him for the past 4 months. We're finalizing a deal next week. He's bringing me in as an operating partner on 2 of his commercial properties. I'm going to be managing the restructuring of his entire real estate portfolio." "Does your family know Mr. Hennessey?" "My father claims to. He dropped his name at a dinner once years ago. Said they went to the same club." I looked into it. "They don't." Cassandra made a small sound that was the closest she ever got to a laugh. "So, your brother walked in to threaten you with a resource that's actually in your corner. He doesn't know that yet. When does he find out?" "Whenever he makes the call," I said. "He made the call 3 days later. I know this because Mr. Hennessey called me first." "I had an interesting conversation this morning," he said. He's in his late 60s, careful with his words. The kind of man who has been in enough rooms to know exactly how much silence to put between sentences. "A gentleman called claiming to represent your family's investment interests in your firm. He said they were concerned about the direction of the business and were looking for outside validation of the leadership." I closed my eyes for exactly 1 second. "I apologize for that." "Don't," he said. I found it clarifying. He seemed to believe I had leverage over your lease situation. He was misinformed. "Yes, I told him I was a partner, not a landlord." A pause. "I also told him that I would be mentioning the call to you and that I found unsolicited approaches to my business associates to be a particular kind of rudeness I don't tolerate easily." I thanked him. He told me to see him Friday to finalize the paperwork. Then he hung up. I sat with that for a while. My brother had called my most important business relationship and tried to use it as a threat. He had walked in with a number and a fake document and a smile, and he had genuinely believed that was enough. He believed it because for his entire life, that had been enough. Someone always covered it. Someone always absorbed the cost of his assumption, not this time. What happened over the following 2 weeks was not dramatic in the way he expected, and it was not quick. It was methodical. I want to be honest about that, because I think there's a version of the story where I'm some kind of avenger, and that's not what I was. I was just done. I hired an attorney, not someone connected to my firm, an outside counsel, and had a letter sent to my parents' address that formally documented our estrangement, outlined the absence of any financial relationship between us, and made clear that any further contact with my business associates, clients, or staff would be treated as tortious interference. My attorney told me the letter probably wouldn't stop them. She was right. But it created a paper trail, which was the point. My brother called me 4 times. I didn't answer. He sent a text that said, "We need to talk like adults." I screenshotted it and forwarded it to my attorney. My mother called once from a number I didn't recognize. I picked up because I didn't know it was her. She started crying immediately, which was her first move in every difficult conversation going back to when I was 9 years old. She said I was destroying the family. She said my father was sick. She used the word sick but didn't specify, which I had learned meant she didn't want me to ask follow-up questions. She said my brother was just trying to help. I told her I hoped my father felt better soon and that I was going to end the call. She said, "If you hang up on me," I said, "I hope you both find stability. I genuinely mean that. Goodbye." And I hung up. I sat in my office for a few minutes after that, not crying. Not relieved either, exactly. Just feeling the weight of what it costs to say something you've needed to say for a decade. It's not clean. It doesn't feel like a movie ending. It just feels like finally putting something down that was too heavy to carry. The deal with Mr. Hennessey closed on a Tuesday. We signed in his office on the 32nd floor, his attorney on one side of the table and mine on the other. And afterward, he shook my hand and said he'd been watching my work for 18 months before he'd approached me, which I hadn't known. "I don't partner with people lightly," he said. "Neither do I said. Joel took me out for dinner that night to celebrate, just the two of us, because that's the kind of team we are. We talked about the next 18 months, about the 2 new hires we needed, about the client pipeline. Around 9 o'clock he said quietly, "Your family never came back, did they?" "They tried," I said. "But no." He nodded like he understood what that meant, and he probably did because he's been there for 3 years and he's watched me navigate it. "Good," he said. And then we ordered dessert. Here is what I want to say to anyone watching this who recognizes some part of what I've described. There is a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from being dismissed by people who are supposed to see you, from being the person in the family who figures things out and then watches those things get taken for granted or worse, quietly resented. From achieving something real and having the people who should be proud of you only show up when they've done the math. I'm not angry at my family. That surprised me when I realized it. I thought I would be angrier, but mostly I just feel like I've been honest, maybe for the first time, about what the relationship actually was and wasn't. And that honesty made room for everything else. The firm is doing well. Better than I projected when I started, which means my projections were too conservative, which means next year's projections will be more aggressive. My brother, from what I understand through people we both know, is telling a version of this story where I abandoned the family when they needed me most. He's welcome to tell it. I know what version I lived, and I know that when my father slammed that folder on my desk and told me to think about what I was throwing away, I had already thought about it. For years I had thought about it. I just smiled and said, "Go ahead, make the call," because I knew who was going to pick up. I've thought a lot about why it all unfolded the way it did. Not obsessively, I'm past that. But in the quiet way you think about things when you're finally far enough from them to see the shape. My brother didn't walk into my office because he was bold. He walked in because his whole life had taught him that showing up was enough. That confidence without preparation was a form of currency. That the people who actually do the work will, at some point, get tired of saying no. He learned that from watching our parents, and our parents learned it from somewhere too. And I don't say that to excuse any of it. I say it because I think it matters to understand that people like this aren't villains in some clean narrative sense. They're just people who never had to face a real consequence. until they do. What I've come to believe, and I mean believe in the way you believe something after you've lived it, not just read it, is that how you treat the people who don't yet have power over you is the thing that determines everything later. My family treated me like a resource when I was convenient and a burden when I wasn't. They made that choice consistently, over years, in small ways and large ones. And then one day I had built something real, and they came back expecting the dynamic to be the same. It wasn't. It couldn't be. The gap between what they gave and what they expected had grown too wide to pretend away. The intelligence piece is the one I think about most. Not IQ, not credentials. I mean the kind of intelligence that makes you ask, before you walk into a room, what does the other person already know? My brother never asked that question. He assumed that because he didn't know about Mr. Hennessey and me, I didn't know about his plan to use Mr. Hennessey against me. That assumption was his undoing. Every strong position I had built, the partnership, the legal documentation, the paper trail, the relationships, he simply hadn't accounted for because he hadn't done the work of imagining me as someone who prepares. That's the thing about being underestimated for a long time. Eventually it stops hurting and starts being useful. And the staying power, the years of the studio apartment, the folding table, the client who asked if it had health insurance like it was a joke, that wasn't martyrdom. It was just what building something actually requires. Nobody tells you that part clearly enough. They tell you the success story in its final form and leave out the Tuesday nights when you're questioning everything and there's nobody in the stands. You have to make your own peace with that stretch of time, or you don't make it through. Cassandra told me once that the cost of building something real is that you have to become someone different in the process, and not everyone in your life will be comfortable with who you become. She was right. Some of them will call it abandonment. Some will tell a version of the story where you're the one who failed them. Let them. I know what I built and I know what it cost and I know who was there. Joel was there. Cassandra was there. Mr. Hennessey, in his way, was there. That's enough. That has always been enough.